Hey, I'm Kyle. Welcome to this episode of the Newfoundland Hobbyist. It is a Saturday morning here, and there's a big snowstorm going on outside, but thankfully we're here tucked nicely inside the shop. It's not too cold out here, even though I don't have a stove, but I've got a really cool project to work on, something I'm so excited about because it's a first for me. Now, as mentioned in the previous episode of the show, I'm a big time axe guy. I've got a huge collection of axes, all different types and sorts, and ranging from new to back in the late 1800s. I love them all, and it's just become a big hobby of mine. But this is a first for me, and this is a double bit axe. Most of you will probably recognize that already. This was given to me by a family member. Thank you so much. You know who you are, and you're probably watching this right now. But this was a very nice gift, and it is my first double bit axe. So I've been looking for the past few years for a good double bit axe. I've come across several, but they're always complete junk. They've always been ground so far back that they're just a stubby little piece of steel that is just garbage at that point. This axe, although it's pretty rough, it's got some pieces missing, it's really rusty, it's still got that nice long bit, has plenty of steel, and a gorgeous taper. I think this axe came from Nippers Harbor, Newfoundland. That's what my family member told me. It came from Nippers Harbor on the Bayburt Peninsula, and it is going to get a restoration today. It's still got a piece of the eye left in there, and this is the worst part of the axe here. Let me show you what's going on. So you can see this axe is pretty rusty. It's got a lot of deep pitting, but that's never been a problem for me. I always clean that up well, and it just ends up looking great and giving a ton of character to the axe. The bit is in good condition, pretty good condition. This side is the worst side. We have a chunk of steel missing right here. I don't know if you can see that. It's like a delamination of steel. I don't think it'll be a problem. I can work around that. This bit on this side is in pretty great shape. No edge on it whatsoever, but that's not a problem. The bottom of the axe here is good. The steel is in pretty good shape, just needs to be cleaned up. But the top here, I'm thinking this axe was probably stored sitting on its handle like this, so it's been rained on probably for years or something like that, and this steel here is gone all crumbly, just completely deteriorated. So I'm going to have to cut that down a little bit until we get into some good steel. That's not a big deal. I think it'll be fine, but it just makes a little bit extra work. Let's start off by taking out that eye. That's the first order of business. Just an important heads up I want to mention first. A lot of people, I've seen it done a lot of times, and it's pretty common here, is to throw these heads in the fire and to burn that eye out. Do not do that. These axes are heat treated, so there's a specific temper in the bit of the axe to make it suitable for cutting. Not too hard, not too soft, and once you throw that in the fire like that, you destroy that temper. So I'm going to start by clamping this head here in my soft-jawed vise. So I'm going to use a piece of steel, call this a drift, and we'll see if we can tap out that eye. I'm not sure if it'll work because sometimes these pop out fairly easily, sometimes they don't. This is really old and has been sitting here a long time, so it might be all fused together with rust. We might have to punch some holes and drill it out. Okay, let's see what happens. Very little movement. So I've only had this happen a couple times before, where I just couldn't pound out the eye. I've been pounding and pounding on this thing, and it is not moving, so there's just too much rust caked on, I guess. I've got it drilled right full of holes, and still it won't let go of the sides, so I'm having to take an old chisel and just slowly chip out the extra wood in there. After a lot of time chipping, you can see we've got it cleaned out, but you can see there's also a lot of scale left on there, and we've broke away a little bit of that up top, because if you remember at the start of the episode I said how it was so pitted and just heavily corroded, it just plucks away. So I'm going to have to take that down. Like I said, I'll just reprofile the top of this axe a little bit, but first I've got to start cleaning out this eye. Now no, I'm not cleaning out in here because I'm so particular. I can't handle a little bit of dirt inside the axe eye, but it's just so I can get down to real metal and see how much scale is there. Now we've got some of the most unenjoyable work done. That is to get that old eye out. That's always a pain, and it's never fun. It's just something you got to do to get to the good stuff. Now I'm going to start clean up. This is a really fun part. I've got a wire brush and this little angle grinder. I'm just going to start carving away the pitting and rust, and this is what will help you see really what you have here. These are really aggressive. I don't use these often unless I have a tool that's really rusty and pitted like this. I usually just use the bench grinder with a brass wheel that turns at a slower pace, but for this one I'll use this. I try to use a face mask whenever I'm at any of this stuff, because a lot of that dust particle flying around really gets your nasal passages irritated. Safety glasses always, especially when dealing with these wire wheels. Now isn't that a thing of beauty? Just look at how dark that patina is. Almost looks like there's a coating on the steel, it's so dark. You see right here, you can see the quench line, or the lamination, where there's probably a different piece of steel in here for the cut edge. Usually a softer steel is used for the body of the axe back here, and then you laminate a harder steel for the cut edge that could be heat treated. This was a way to save money, so you didn't use all this high-end steel for the entire axe. And if you use this harder steel for this part of the body, it might have been a little too brittle and might have fractured. So you'd use a softer steel for here, and because of that, notice the difference in pitting. You've got this heavy, deep pitting here, and it almost stops once it gets to this line. So you can see that on both sides. That's so interesting to see that. Now you can see this heavy pitting, not near as much towards the bottom, but near the top of the axe here, you've got that heavy pitting. And that's not much of a problem. I just need to carve this down past where this is kind of crumbling away here. So at least to get a smooth, kind of a smooth line. What we have here now. Notice that shape is not bad, so I've kind of created the best sweep I could by removing the least amount of metal I could. See, it's all cleaned up and we have a nice rim of steel right around that eye, so it looks like we're going to be good. You can see that nice long taper now. Now's the point where I'm going to get to rough sharpening. I'm going to use that same belt sander I just used and just by hand create a sharpening. Now I've had a lot of experience at this, so it doesn't really intimidate me. I can hold my angles pretty good and get a nice even grind on there. So after all our grinding, this is what we're down to. So you can probably already tell this head has been completely overhauled. Between that eye removed and the reshaping of the head itself to clean up the steel, to whole new grinds on this axe. And this is just rough grind right off my belt sander tools. Right now we're going to get on to the most intimidating part of the project. Okay, the next part is the handle, and this is the only thing that's really different for me. So the next part of this axe, you probably guessed it, is the handle, and this is the part that's really different for me. The work so far is no different than any other axe I've ever done, and that is standard cleanup, rust removal, clearing the eye, sharpening a grind, just twice, so it's no difference than any other axe. Carving that eye for a double bit is a little bit different, and I don't have any fancy bot handle. This is a piece of hickory from a local store. I selected the grain, so it's a nice, good direction, but it's a pickaxe handle. So it's got this big swelled up end on it, which is enough wood to carve or to fill out that double eye, that symmetrical double eye. Now, definitely not going to be this long. I'm thinking we're going to cut her off somewhere around here. This is a smaller axe. This isn't a very large double bit. So I'm thinking with the size of that head, maybe we'll cut her off somewhere like here, and that'll be a decent packable length. This handle is huge, so I'm also going to trim it down. Basically, I bought this just so I could have some hickory wood. Hickory is hard, it's much harder than any wood we have here in the province, so that's why I'm going with this. So I've marked here roughly the length I want this handle, and I am going to cut it off with one of my panel saws. This is a beautiful old saw. I've got a whole collection of hand saws that I've restored, all sharpened and tuned well. This old Sorby draw knife shouldn't be a stranger to any of you. Nice and sharp, ready to go. So we have finally reached the top here, and we've got a very nice fit around the bottom, and of course the top will be wedged out. So we've met all the way around the eye. We've got to take it off once more and take it down a little bit more, clean it up with the rasp, and that'll do it. So I finally got that handle back off, and we can see right where those spots are that we're getting the most contact. Once we wedge that out, of course that'll be much more tight again. I'm going to clean up with the rasp, and we still have to cut our kerf here for a wedge. Cuts like crazy. I picked it up in an antique store. This next part I always find quite tough and fairly intimidating, and that is cutting my kerf for a wedge. I'm going to start off with a hacksaw here, just because it has a pretty fine blade and I can control it pretty well. Now I'll get in there with a slightly coarser saw. Maybe my frame back here. The difficulty is not veering as you go down, not veering out to one side or the other. I'm trying to cut straight down the handle. It's very tough. And then we have our boiled linseed oil. This is my choice of oil for axes. It's time to get started. What I'll do is I'll put some oil on my handle here, just so that wood is oiled and protected. Now, if we've done everything just like we should have to this point, we should be able to sit that head down on the handle, turn our bottom up, get it started. I use the back of my axe for this because it's nice and flat. I find with the back of my axe I can control where that wedge is going. You probably already see that wood flaring out. Now I'm going to take this out of the vise and hit it freehand. I've been doing leather work for a few years now. Here we have some scraps of hide, nice thick leather left from a previous project. Gonna get work on crafting a sheath for this axe. I don't like the old plastic sheaths and stuff. There's nothing classier to me than a nice leather sheath, hand done, which is what we're gonna work on right now for this beautiful double bit. I don't want to put on that final edge until I can cover up. So here we go. To glue the sheath together. Technically, if you're stitching or riveting, you don't necessarily need glue, but it gives you a better finished product and it helps hold everything together while you're stitching. This one goes on. This one. Give them 20 minutes, a half hour. You'll be able to haul this out in clamps and work away on it, no problem.
Notice I got no big fancy press here. Anytime I do leather work, every stitch is run by hand, which is why if you've ever paid for leather work from me, if you've ever hired me to do any work for you, you'd know the prices aren't super cheap, and that's because it just takes so much time. And leather work is a fortune these days. To actually buy hide is really expensive.
We're at the very final stages of our project here. It's time to put an edge on since we have that mask all finished up. And we've got a pretty keen edge on this axe already from the belt sander. I'm pretty good with the belt sander at this point. But I'm going to use what I talked about in a previous video, and that is the rooster method. So it's just a foam-backed sanding pad here with some various grits of sandpaper. I'm going to work up to 2,000 today. And we're going to put a real nice polish on this edge. So I'm usually try to be pretty patient with this process just to get it right. So I'll just sit down, take my time, and work away at that edge. Don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys. They're never at home and they're always alone. You ready to see our newly restored axe? There she is. If you remember what she looked like originally, that pitted piece of rust, look at it now. So let's recap. We have that rusty old head that we cleaned up and trimmed down on top, which is why we have this shiny steel here. We sharpened it and fit a new handle. We have our beautiful handcrafted sheath. I opted to go with a single strap because I thought a double was unnecessary here. The sheath is deep enough that there's no way it could come off with a single. So our sheath comes off in two pieces, and then look at that. So there it is, another project in the books. I hope you really enjoyed this episode of the Newfoundland Hobbyist. If you'd like to see more projects like this, or see this axe in use, head over to my Facebook page, Kyle Noseworthy-Weeder Fan, or go on YouTube and search up Kyle Noseworthy. You'll find my channel and tons of other cool content just like this. That's it for this week. Make sure you tune in next week to the Newfoundland Hobbyist.